Okay, I want to do something very special for being gone for so long. I could do the Disney Parks models, which I've been dying to get to, but I really want to get my show formula down first. I could do a Star Wars model. We've done a lot of those too. Oh, I know, Groovers. Haha! Hey everyone, and welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderly Cone, and in this episode, we're going to be building the infamous Piececool Colorful Peacock. And Groove Builders, I'm extremely excited to build this with you. Let's get down to the workbench and take a look at the package together. Alright, Groove Builders, welcome to the workbench. We have our Piececool Colorful Peacock in some pretty awesome green packaging. And if you guys look near the top, you'll notice it's a 4 out of 7 star rating. Now, these rating systems aren't really trustworthy, and they tend to vary pretty heavily from model to model, so we can't necessarily go by this. But Groovers, I'm very excited to check this model out. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back. On the back, we get a brief look at our metal, followed by a good look at our peacock. And Groove Builders, I think this peacock looks amazing. Now, just below that, we have some instructions on how to build our model, followed by some information on these kits. Now on the right hand side here, we get a brief history of the peacock as well as some information. Now on the very last bit here, we have the QR code, which we can scan to get a 360 view of our model if we need it while we're building. This can come in handy when we're putting different parts of detail onto our peacock. Alright, Groove Builders, let's go ahead and open up our package. Awesome, look at this, Groove Builders. We have our metal, extremely colorful, and we have our instructions. It looks like a whole 2 pages of instructions. Groove Builders, let's get this all opened up and get building. Grabbing our wire cutters and our metal, we begin to cut out our first couple of pieces for the Piececool Peacock. Now, Groovers, you're gonna have to forgive me. My voice is still a little raspy. I've been sick for the last couple of weeks, but don't worry, R2's been taking very good care of me. You're right, R2, your onion soup has been on point lately, and quite frankly, I think that's why I got my voice back as quick as I did. But you're getting me distracted with soup, R2. We need to be talking about the Piececool Peacock, and Groove Builders, I must say, it's really nice to be holding this metal in my hand again, especially after that Micro World Godzilla build that we did recently. This metal from Piececool is not only highly detailed, but it's also strong, making it easier for us to be able to form our pieces in the desired shapes that we need. Now, you might be looking at this model thinking that you've seen it in another brand, probably Iconics, and you're right. Iconics has recently released a peacock for us to build, but if you were to look at the peacock from Iconics and the peacock from Piececool, you'll notice something right away. They're pretty much exactly the same, except for the Piececool instructions are in Chinese. And Groove Builders, that really is the only difference between these two models. They are exactly the same. So if you're following along at home and you have an Iconics version, don't worry. Everything I say can pretty much be applied directly over to those instructions. Speaking of instructions, R2, lay them on the screen. Thanks, bud. Starting at the top, we have a picture of our peacock and also a model number, P102. On the right-hand side, we have some recommended tools, which here they recommend some wire cutters and some needle nose pliers. The wire cutters are very useful for cutting out our pieces from the metal. You want to make sure to get as close as you possibly can to your piece before snipping it out. Any little bits of metal left over can get in the way of us putting our parts together, so you really do want to make sure you get as close as you possibly can so your model looks perfect in the end. Our needle nose pliers are very handy when it comes to forming our pieces into the different shapes that we need to build our peacock. They're also handy for getting into those hard to reach places and bending the tabs in the desired direction. Groovers, both of these tools are great recommendations for us to build our peacock, but I also recommend a strong set of tweezers to help you bend these pieces into shape. In my videos, you'll see me using a detailed tweezer set. These aren't necessary, but they are definitely useful for bending all of our different shapes when we're doing metal models. However, like I said, a good strong set of tweezers will do just fine for this particular model. Next, just below our recommended tools section, we have some instructions on how to properly form and cut out our pieces. Starting with A, the first thing we want to make sure we do, like I said earlier, is cut as close as we possibly can with our wire cutters to the parts, leaving none of the little bits of metal behind. Then we have B, which highlights our insertion tabs, our fold lines, and our insertion holes. Next, with C, they show us how to properly bend our pieces using the fold lines in the metal. That's a very important part for any new metal model builders out there. Also, you want to make sure not to bend your pieces too many times. If you do run the risk of actually breaking the piece. But just like Metal Earth, Piececool will actually replace any parts that you break. You will have to wait a few weeks for the replacement piece, but at the end of the day, you'll be able to complete your model. Then we have our classic circles and triangles, and these are literally scattered through all of our instructions. They tell us how to bend our tabs. Every time you see these circles, you want to take as much of the tab as you possibly can in your tweezers and then bend it down 90 degrees. When you see these triangles, you want to take as much of the tab in your tweezers as possible and then twist them 90 degrees. Both of these ways of securing the tabs are needed throughout the instructions, and I do recommend following them. At the very end, when everything is complete, you can go back and look at the model and see if there's any tabs you want to change. That way you don't run the risk of breaking anything or possibly assembling something incorrectly during the build. Lastly, at the bottom we have 4 symbols and a warning. Now, the 2 symbols that look like a speech bubble, black and white, represent both the engraved and non-engraved side of our metal. These 2 symbols can be found throughout our instructions, although I really don't know how useful they are for this build, as it's pretty easy to tell which side of the metal is going to be used. Then we have our attention point, which we don't really encounter too often during our instructions, but if we do encounter it, all it means is we need to pay a little bit more attention to this particular part, either because it can be easily broken or warped. So if you see this symbol, pay a little bit more attention. And the last symbol is shaded black and white, and with this build you're not going to see this symbol. Now, if you are building other Piececool models and you come across this symbol, all it means is that you want to make sure that your parts are lined up. This could be because the parts are going to move later on, or you're building some kind of architectural structure that you don't want crooked. And now we have that warning on the bottom of the page, which I think is pretty interesting because they're warning us not to take all of our parts out at once, because it can be kind of confusing to figure out what part is which when it's already been taken out of the metal. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, all of our parts are actually numbered, and when we're going through our instructions, you're going to see a number associated with a piece. You need to look this number up on the parts diagrams. They look like this. With the Piececool Colorful Peacock, your instructions come with 2 pages worth of parts diagrams. You'll notice that each one of these diagrams look like a piece of your metal that you have in your kit. I personally recommend taking your metal and orientating them to the pictures on the page. This just makes it a lot easier for us to be able to find our parts when we need them. And that pretty much sums up our instructions for the Piececool Colorful Peacock. Did I forget anything, R2? Yeah, I didn't think so. So, what's with the peacock? You know, you're right, R2, that was a little bit harsh. I shouldn't be saying what's with the peacock, but it is quite interesting to see how much of a role this beautiful bird has played in different human cultures. There's even a lot of stories written about peacocks, but most of them have some kind of heavy moral associated with them. Something that you could learn from, R2. Well, how about this one? A crow lived in the forest and was absolutely satisfied with his life. But one day, he saw a swan. This swan is so white, he thought, and I'm so black. This swan must be the happiest bird in the world. He expressed his thoughts to the swan. Actually, the swan replied, I was feeling that I was the happiest bird around until I saw a parrot, which has 2 colors. I now think the parrot is the happiest bird in creation. The crow then approached the parrot. The parrot explained, I lived a very happy life until I saw a peacock. I have only 2 colors, but the peacock has multiple colors. The crow then visited the peacock in the zoo and saw the hundreds of people that had gathered to see him. After the people had left, the crow approached the peacock. Dear peacock, the crow said, you are so beautiful. Every day, thousands of people come to see you, but when they see me, they immediately shoo me away. I think you are the happiest bird on the planet." The peacock replied, "I always thought that I was the most beautiful and happy bird on the planet. But because of my beauty, I'm entrapped in the zoo. I've examined the zoo very carefully, and I have realized that a crow is the only bird not kept in a cage. So for the past few days, I have been thinking that if I were a crow, I would be happily roaming everywhere." Do you understand the moral to that story, R2? I didn't think you did. We did it, Groove Builders! We built the Colorful Peacock from Piececool, and this model was an absolute pleasure to build. Not to mention it looks fantastic when it's complete. Let's talk about what it took to build this model in construction. My first point when it comes to building the Piececool Colorful Peacock is that this metal is highly detailed, and although it is very detailed, the metal's still quite strong. That being said, if you overbend any parts of this, as a new metal model builder maybe, you will still run the risk of breaking some of your parts, especially the tabs here along the wings. My recommendation is always to look ahead in the instructions just a little bit to make sure that you know where all your parts are going. This way, when you bend your pieces, you're not going to necessarily make too many mistakes, running the risk of breaking your parts. My second point is about the tail of our peacock. Now, when all these feathers are bent correctly, it looks fantastic, especially in the light and how it goes with all the different colors. But it's very important to bend these feathers correctly, and the best way to do that is to get to the very base of the feather and bend from there. In the beginning of my video, you'll notice that I was actually bending them at the back part, which really didn't look that great at the end, so I had to go back and reshape them all. Save yourself the time, go right to the base and bend from there. You'll thank me in the end. And with that being said, Groove Builders, let's move on to build time. The Piececool Peacock took me just over 3 hours to build, and I think that's going to be about average for most metal model builders out there. However, Groove Builders, like I always say, it's never a race to get these models complete. And you definitely don't want to rush this one because of how fantastic it looks in the end. Remember, Groove Builders, once you're done, so enjoy the time that you have. And finally, Groove Builders, my thoughts. The Piececool Colorful Peacock was an absolute pleasure to build. I mean, just with all of this laser etching and color, you would think that the metal would be brittle and really hard to work with, but actually, Groove Builders, it was the exact opposite, which I think is a very unique point. And to be totally honest, Groove Builders, I think that any new metal model builder out there would actually have a really good time building this model. Sure, there are some difficult parts like maybe the neck here, but once you build 1 or 2 pieces, you do get into the rhythm of it pretty quickly, or at least I found myself getting into the rhythm of this neck pretty quickly. The only other thing I would really want to mention about this model is that it can kind of get a little bit flimsy right here in the feet. So if you are moving this around your office or at home, just make sure you're being careful, because I do think that over time these feet will just snap. And with that being said, Groove Builders, we're at the end of our show. I had a really good time building the Piececool Colorful Peacock with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of really cool content coming out in the future. Did you build this model at home, or do you have any questions about how this came together? Make sure you leave a comment down below. I do my best to get back to everything that I see down there, especially if it's involving a question about building. Until next time, Groove Builders, keep building. Alright, now I gotta introduce you to Godzilla.